His logic was sound. All he had to do was copy what Splinter did with the turtles. So he gave them names, weapons, ways to differentiate themselves, and trained them to take down his enemies. But the stars of this video would prove to him that sometimes nature is stronger than nurture. Join me today as I dive into the swampy history of the original punk frogs. The frogs were created by Michael Reeves, a legendary writer whose work on shows like Batman the Animated Series and Gargoyles helped define the childhood of more than one generation. The frogs were similar to the turtles in the sense that they all looked alike. But unlike the turtles, most viewers weren't exposed to them long enough to memorize who was who. So here are the key visual clues to tell them apart. Attila the Frog wears a red shirt with a yellow stripe, a round pendant, and fights with a flail. He was voiced by Townsend Coleman, who also voiced Michelangelo. Genghis Frog rocks a purple shirt with yellow circles, a triangular pendant, and uses a battle axe. He was voiced by Jim Cummings, the same voice as Leatherhead. Napoleon Bonafrog has a yellow shirt with a red stripe, a round pendant, and wields a bullwhip. He was mostly voiced by Pat Fraley, known for Krang and Baxter, but was once played by Townsend Coleman in a later episode. Finally, Rasputin the Mad Frog wears an orange shirt with purple circles, a triangular pendant, and uses a bow and arrow. He was voiced by Nicholas Omana, though he didn't get any more lines after his first two appearances. The frogs were introduced as a twist on the classic evil twin trope, a way to explore the idea that being raised for evil isn't an excuse to stay that way. It's a theme the series would return to, and one I recently explored in the Mondo Gecko video. The punk frogs owe their mutation to one of Shredder's many failed plans. He wanted to create new mutants to fight the turtles, so he asked Krang, who was stuck in Dimension X, to send him a canister of mutagen. But an ion storm messed with the coordinates, and the portal opened in the wrong place, the Okefenokee Swamp, right on the Florida-Georgia border. The canister dropped into the swamp and cracked open. This very same mutagen would later play a crucial role in two other stories, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. That same day, a family was vacationing nearby. Their kid had found 4 frogs and tried to convince his parents to adopt them. But after some mild rejection, he returned them to the swamp. That's when the frogs came into contact with the mutagen, and the family fled in terror. After pinpointing where the canister landed, Shredder decided to retrieve it himself. However, wearing his full armor would attract too much attention, so he used a holographic projector to disguise himself as a civilian. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why didn't he just wear actual clothes? Well, while never explicitly said, his wardrobe was probably still back in the Technodrome, in Dimension X. Which leads to other questions, like, was he essentially homeless? Was he taking showers? Was he doing laundry every day? Am I going through a midlife crisis? Just repeat to yourself. It's just a show. I should really just relax. News of the frog's unexpected encounter with that Taurus family spread quickly and reached April, who promptly warned the turtles. Their plan was to head to Florida to investigate, but to keep the turtles busy, Shredder ordered Bebop and Rocksteady to go on a rampage while he retrieved the ooze. At the swamp, Shredder found the empty canister and then the 4 mutant frogs. After convincing them he was a nice guy, he gave them clothes with his holographic projector, which I'm assuming were later replaced by real clothes that looked exactly the same. He took them with him to New York, warning that they had to fight against the evil Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. To replicate Splinter's success, Shredder named them after his personal inspirations. He gave them names of known historical figures associated with power, conquest, and fear. After a short training, Shredder sent the frogs to rob a bank. The media confused them with the turtles, and as a result, the mayor put Captain Hoffman in charge of his anti-turtle squad. After this success, Shredder sent the frogs to steal chemicals to make more mutagen. Donatello immediately recognized the stolen chemicals and predicted where they were going to attack next. Having met the turtles, the frogs were concerned about Shredder's plans. Genghis and Rasputin considered simply talking and reasoning with them to be a better idea, but Shredder continued manipulating them into destroying the turtles. This didn't end well for them. During the next heist, the frogs were ambushed by the anti-turtle squad and frozen on sight. The turtles were ready to escape from Hoffman, but Leonardo convinced them to bring the frogs with them. After all, they were all mutants and shouldn't fall under the squad's control. The turtles took the most vulnerable path. They took them to their lair and asked Master Splinter for advice. They decided to free them in hopes that they wouldn't attack them. The frogs realized the turtles weren't the villains after all. Shredder was. With a newfound alliance, they set a trap for Shredder in an abandoned prison. Unfortunately, things didn't go quite as planned. Hoffman tracked them down, and Shredder, Bebop, and Rocksteady escaped using the holographic projector disguised as anti-turtle officers. Thanks to Rasputin's explosive arrows, the turtles and the frogs found their way into the sewers and left Hoffman with nothing. Since he never showed up again, it's safe to assume the mayor wasn't too happy with his performance. With their initial adventure over, the turtles made a map to help the frogs return to the swamp. Mikey even gifted them a pizza for the road, but the frogs rejected it, as they considered pizza to be disgusting. I mentioned earlier that the mutagen didn't just stop with the frogs. It kept causing trouble in the swamp, and one of its biggest accidents was the creation of Leatherhead. Once mutated, the alligator discovered the frogs and immediately made them his slaves. Rasputin managed to send out an emergency call, and the turtles traveled south to rescue their amphibian friends and free them from Leatherhead. From that moment on, getting all the frogs in one episode became almost impossible. The frogs started having their own stories. One day, Genghis started wondering if there was anything else in life to experience, so he decided to go visit the turtles in New York. The other frogs didn't come with him, as it was crawdad season. In New York, Genghis stumbled upon Shredder and Krang's latest scheme: giant insect monsters. Genghis helped the turtles put an end to that menace. Around the time that the Battletoads video game came out, Napoleon Bonafrog had his own adventure. It was yet another of Krang's schemes around the mutagen in the swamp. This time, using it through a device would make mutants into slaves. Shredder, Bebop, and Rocksteady accidentally used the weapon on Napoleon, making him Hulk out. But despite being under the control of Shredder, his condition wasn't permanent, and their control over him also fluctuated a lot. With Napoleon's help, they captured Donatello, and Shredder used him to fix Krang's device and make its effects permanent on Napoleon. Naturally, Donatello rewired it to do the exact opposite. Immediately after that, they defeated the Shredder's plan once again. But things weren't completely back to normal. After seeing Michelangelo's pizza had no flies on it, Napoleon got enraged and hulked out again. Not long after Napoleon's solo adventure, Genghis and Attila made a silent cameo in one episode where Raph and Mikey traveled down to the swamps to visit them. The last proper appearance of the Punk Frogs came in the episode Dirk Savage, Mutant Hunter. In that story, Napoleon and Genghis arrived in New York to visit the Turtles, at the worst possible time. Dirk Savage, working for a millionaire named A.J. Howard, was hunting mutants to create a mind-controlled army. Fortunately, the frogs were eventually rescued by Raph, Donnie, and even Dirk Savage himself once he realized the truth about his employer. Fortunately for fans of the cartoon, the universe is no longer closed. The Saturday Morning Adventures comic series picked up right where the classic cartoon stopped using the frogs, between season 7 and 8. They co-starred in a two-parter involving Shredder's plan to be able to work with a strange metal. Krang asked his soldiers for a device, but due to interference, it fell into the swamp, just like the mutagen did before. The Turtles knew something was up, but they didn't want to leave the city unattended, just in case Shredder attacked. Raph and Donnie went to the swamps, teaming up with Rasputin and Attila against Leatherhead. While they mitigated his threat, Shredder took advantage of the distraction and escaped with the device. Genghis and Napoleon teamed up with Mikey and Leo in New York against Baxter Stockman. The two became essential in defeating the Fly, as he had set up a trap for reptiles, but frogs, being amphibians, freed the turtles and helped them defeat Baxter. On a side note, the frogs going against a giant fly was actually an inspired match. The Punk Frogs were popular enough to hop across the pond, landing right in the pages of the Daily Mirror. Back in 1990, at the height of Turtlemania, there were actually two TMNT newspaper strips running simultaneously. This one, however, used the UK branding, Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. Keep in mind that the newspaper strip should be considered a spin-off universe from the show. This is also a topic for another video. In the Holiday in Florida story, Krang had enough of Shredder. After firing him, he enlisted Bebop and Rocksteady's help setting up a trap for the Turtles. Passing as a secret benefactor, he paid for their stay in a Miami hotel. Once there, the Turtles discovered Bebop and Rocksteady in the area, and they chased them into the swamps, where they were faced against 4 recently mutated frogs. But these weren't the punk frogs, and the Turtles were taken by surprise. Fortunately, the real punk frogs were in the area, and after seeing their friends in danger, they jumped in to help. In the Japanese spin-off original video animation, Legend of the Super Mutant, Rasputin, Genghis, and Attila made a blink-and-you'll-miss-it cameo, standing around as a tornado blew past them. This is a story better left for another video. Despite the occasional frog mutant showing up here and there, this version of the punk frogs was completely absent from video games, until 2020, when they finally debuted in Mutant Madness. Most fans probably noticed their return in the 2022 hit Shredder's Revenge. This version of the punk frogs had a pretty strange journey when it came to toy shelves. While the characters were shaped by writer Michael Reeves for the cartoon, it's unclear if the idea predates the show. Peter Laird had pitched a character for Playmates named Croak, and one of his designs looked suspiciously like the Genghis frog figure we'd eventually get. Some designs by Errol McCarthy were unearthed by the French site Tortuepedia. In one of these concepts, we can see an attempt to create a frog named Arnold Schwarzenegger. The rest of the low-res images showed the visual evolution that eventually led to the 1989 release of Genghis Frog. Now, most toy companies would have reused the same mold to crank out the other 3 frogs, but Playmates avoided reusing parts whenever possible, which was actually one of the reasons the Mutanimals cartoon never took off, as they preferred releasing toys that didn't look too similar to each other. Since the frogs all looked pretty similar in the cartoon, this posed a problem for Playmates. Unlike the Turtles, who had to look the same due to licensing, the frogs were cartoon originals, so the toy designers had more creative freedom. This is why in 1990, when Napoleon Bonafrog finally came out, he looked nothing like his animated self. Instead, he resembled a horned frog with a bumpy, more rugged sculpt that made him look completely different from Genghis. It was a bit of a head-scratcher for kids, but not unusual for this toy line. 9-year-old me didn't care about accuracy. I just wanted all the frogs. But I never got them. Playmates stopped at 2 and totally forgot about Attila and Rasputin. The complete team wouldn't see the light of day until 2021, when NECA released the most faithful versions of the punk frogs yet. They came in 2 2-packs, and to help tell them apart, NECA stuck with the cartoon's idea of giving each frog a different shade of green, something that was present in the cartoon but wasn't clear or consistent enough. Of course, the punk frogs would go on to be reimagined in the 2012 cartoon, the IDW comics, and even Mutant Mayhem, and I'll be covering each of those versions in future videos. It's interesting how the whole concept of the punk frogs seems to have been designed as a joke. They were clearly meant to be a kind of anti-Turtles team. Punk in the derogatory sense, implying thugs, not punk rockers. Scary historical names, medieval weapons, it was all there. Shredder's goal was obvious: recreate what Splinter had done with the Turtles, just with villains. But the joke was on him, because instead of becoming ruthless warriors, the frogs turned out to be really polite. Kind even. This was one of those rare times when nature beat nurture, and hard. Their southern hospitality and peaceful swamp upbringing made it impossible for them to be fully corrupt. It was a great subversion of the evil twin or mirror image trope. These weren't the dark counterparts of the Turtles. They became recurring allies for the Turtles, one of the few cases of characters being introduced and later coming back as an established part of the universe. Their personalities seemed centered around the idea of southern hospitality, something the show made sure to contrast when Leatherhead was introduced, showing us that not all mutants from the swamp were good. I also find the plot to be a take on the Shredder. He had previously mutated 2 criminals in New York that were already loyal to him. He figured any mutant could be twisted into a weapon. But the frogs weren't criminals. They weren't city dwellers. They were just peaceful swamp creatures with a conscience. and you can only lie to someone like that for so long. Personally, I loved the frogs as a kid. Probably because I loved frogs in general. And I didn't care that Napoleon looked different in the toys. Back then, if you didn't have the show on tape, the action figure was the character. And Napoleon looked cool enough to stand on his own. What are your thoughts on the original Punk Frogs? Did you like the changes that Playmates made? Would you have watched a Punk Frogs spin-off cartoon? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the sewers.